Welcome everyone to Therapeutic Astrology Podcast by me, Mana. I'm so pleased you're here because today we are joined by occult scholar and acclaimed author, some say more than 50 books, John Michael Greer. Welcome.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be on.
Yeah. So I am here with your, I believe it's your newest book. It's from 2025. Is it still your newest book?
Um, as far as I know, yes. There's a couple of publishers who may have something out, but I haven't heard yet. One way or another, it's close.
Okay, good. 2025, and it's from Aeon Books, and it's called Revisioning the Tree of Life, a new Cabala, yeah, for magic, meditation, and pathworking. So there's always that with the pronunciation of Cabala. Um, and I'd love to hear you. I have written down a list of questions that I want to
Mhm.
go through with you. But first of all, do you have some comments just about this book? Maybe what's your favorite part of it? What was your favorite part of writing it?
Well, basically, quite many years ago now, this would be 2001, 2002. I ended up making contact with an elderly teacher named John Gilbert. He was one of the best tarot practitioners I have ever met. The guy could do one card divinations and tell you just anything. But he was the inheritor of a whole series of traditions that are all been kind of old occult traditions in the Denver, Boulder, Colorado area. And back during the late 20th century, nobody was really interested in that kind of old-fashioned occultism, and so he ended up kind of holding the bag. And he passed on those traditions to me and a few other people. And this book is basically my attempt to pass on his distinctive version of the Kabbalah. And I don't know that I have a favorite part of it. Mostly the process of writing was fun because it's kind of a trip down memory lane. The several times that John and I actually got together in person, and the many times we talked on the phone or exchanged emails, did things like that. It was it was a very important part of my own education. He was a major figure in my training, really my primary teacher. And so it was really nice to be able to sort of revisit all that stuff and get a sense of, okay, yeah, now I can pass this on to other people. I used to try to talk him into writing a book, into writing several books. I think he had an enormous amount to pass on, but he wouldn't do it.
He
So
wouldn't.
he
Oh,
wouldn't do it.
okay. So
He
he
wouldn't do
never
it.
wrote anything actually
What
himself.
happened? He would write essays. He would write articles. He would write web pages by the ream, but he wouldn't write books.
Okay.
So I copied down everything and I got everything of his that I could. And then after he passed away in 2021, I got to work assembling it and talking. I worked with his widow and made sure that I had as complete a set as I could get of the materials, and then started making it available in one form or another.
I'm really feeling that this is a major part of your life purpose, not just with John Gilbert, but
Mhm.
in everything, like translating and being the one who can put it into words.
Yeah.
You recognize
Well,
that. I feel it's
yeah.
really potent in
Very
your.
much part of what I do.
Yeah.
I think of myself as a kind of occult intellectual dumpster diver. I go through the back alleys and open the dumpster and say, "Wow, look at this! It's barely touched. I bet I can rinse that off and get it back into use." That's
But
kind of what I do.
but I mean, occultism, haven't it all been put into the dumpster in some sense?
Hmm.
Everything that's called
That
esoteric,
too, yes.
you know.
Hmm.
so,
Hmm.
so it's even, yeah, reimagining that. Okay, so let's get into my questions here from reading it. You you say that Western occultism is simply Middle Platonism dressed in wizard robes. Uh,
Yes.
I like that. Can
Mhm.
you expand on that idea? I
Okay,
mean,
let's start.
everything goes back to the ancient Greece.
Well, a lot of things back to or back through, because a lot of what was going on in the time of Plato and his successors, the early and Middle Platonists, was traditions that many of which came from Egypt or came from Babylonia, came from some of the other even more ancient societies, flowed into Greece. Greece was the first nation that I believe anywhere to invent an actual alphabet in which every sound was represented by a letter. So there were several earlier scripts that had just the consonants, as say Hebrew does today, but they didn't have the vowels. And so it was kind of difficult to read. And of course, most of the really old societies use complex symbolic scripts like Egyptian hieroglyphics or Babylonian cuneiform, which you had to be a professional scribe to read.
Mm.
So the Greeks were very heavily involved in the same kind of thing that I'm doing, picking up these older traditions and putting them in a written form that anybody could just pick up and read. So Plato was involved in that. Plato was very deeply involved in that, and of course everyone talks about Plato. Plato's famous. I think it was Alfred North Whitehead who claimed that Western philosophy as a whole can basically be labeled footnotes to Plato, and
Yeah.
he's not wrong, but not many people talk about the folks who came after Plato, who picked up the work that he did and did things with it. There's a little attention given to the Neoplatonists, Plotinus and his successors, but Plotinus was about 500 years after Plato.
Mm.
And between Plato and Plotinus, there was a whole series of other thinkers who are generally called the Middle Platonists, because they're in the middle. They're sort of the filling of the sandwich, with Plato as one piece of bread, Plotinus in the other, and all the others in between. And their goal was to take Platonism, to take Plato's philosophy and say, okay, what can we do with this? How can we apply this? What kind of sense could we make of this? Especially what kind of sense could we make when we apply this to spirituality, to magic, to the various folk and educated traditions, both of Greek culture and of the other traditions that had been brought into Greece from these other older countries. And so an enormous amount of what we now think of as Western occult tradition is Middle Platonism. An enormous amount of it is just, if you read some of the old Middle Platonists, you read Plutarch, if you read Alexander Aphrodisias, you read some of these others, you go, wow, so that's where that came from.
Mm.
So basically, and of course that flowed into occultism even at the time, because you had the Gnostics and you had a lot of other people practicing various kinds of occultism in the ancient world. And they drew very, very heavily from the Middle Platonists. That was their stock in trade. And
Mm.
so, to give themselves an intellectual framework for what they were doing. And so that's kind of what I'm saying here. We need to look at the Middle Platonists and say, okay, that's what's going on here. That's kind of the underpinning, if you will,
Mm.
of the traditions that we still practice today in Western occultism.
Yeah, because you say then that the Kabbalah are connected to Gnostic, Hermetics, and
Mhm.
ultimately to Platonic teachings.
Yeah, this is a very loaded thing to say nowadays, because of course there's a lot of people who want to be very careful about cultural appropriation, but most of what went into the Kabbalah, including such basic things as the Tree of Life, were not originally Jewish. They
Mm.
existed in Gnostic and ultimately Middle Platonic and Pythagorean forms before they reached Judaism. And I mean, one of the things that gets forgotten here is that the Jews were not living off in outer Mongolia or something during this time. They were part of the intellectual life of the ancient world. They were full participants in the culture of the Hellenistic world and so on. So, of course, they drew on the intellectual resources of that time, just as they do today, of course.
Mm.
And so it's not as though it's not as though they stole it. They were part of the culture that created it. But that culture had its roots in Greek culture and in some of the older Egyptian, Babylonian, etc. traditions, rather than within Judaism itself.
Mm. John, there is this sound. I'm trying to think it's gonna go away, but it's not really going away. Do you know what that is? It's like tuk 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 tuk.
I'm not hearing it.
You're not hearing it.
Yeah, I'm not hearing it at all.
Okay,
So
it's only when you speak, and then it's like tuk tuk tuk.
okay,
Okay.
it must be. It may be some kind of artifact of the connection between us.
Yes, could it be that? Well, then I'll keep it. Okay, great. Um, so I mean, when you say revisioning the Tree of Life, and that is
Mhm.
your title, and now we're actually going back to the origins.
Mhm.
How do you mean revisioning? Do you mean actually going back to the roots of it? Or?
Not so much. I do draw on some on Greek. Platonic and Pythagorean traditions in filling out the material, but revisioning here more in the sense of taking the tree of life as a pattern that can be used, that has been used in many different ways.
Mm.
There's a real tendency to, in all traditions these days in the Western world, to get very fundamentalist about things and say, this is the one true path and, it cannot be changed and rah, 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 that kind of nonsense. And A, that's silly. And B, it's historically ignorant because the things have always been in flux. People have always been working with shifting, changing around, trying this, trying that, seeing what works. So when I talk about revisioning the tree of life, first of all, I'm talking about using John Gilbert's rather distinct and frankly idiosyncratic way of thinking about the tree and assigning various principles and concepts and symbolism to the tree. And also more broadly thinking of it as a tool rather than a truth.
Yes.
You see, it's a
Yeah.
very useful tool. But I mean, just if you want to build something with, you need a hammer, you need some nails. You're not going to worry about whether the hammer you get is identical to the first hammer ever made in Neolithic times.
Right.
You're not going to say, no, I insist on a rock hammer because that's the primal original hammer. No, you want a hammer that does the job.
Yeah.
And so many people these days are out there demanding rock hammers or insisting that their latest high-tech hammer is actually the one that was originally used by Og the Caveman, in 16,000 years ago.
I can definitely find that in myself when you're studying. You want to know what is the essence and what is the right
Mhm,
way, and
mhm, mhm,
but and especially in Kabbalah, because there are so many. Do you agree with this? There's like so many different versions of it,
mhm.
and
There,
I
there are.
kind of just had to like keep with one teacher and then kind of hear about other stuff. But you have to
Ab-
like,
abs- Oh, absolutely. And it makes it for practical purposes. You don't want to try to hammer a nail with 15 hammers in your hand. It's going to be rather awkward. You pick one hammer that works for you and use that to drive the nail.
yeah,
But that doesn't mean you have to be all pompous and saying, "No, this is the one true hammer."
exactly.
It's the hammer you have. It's the hammer that works for you in
Yeah.
exactly that sense. The system of Kabbalah that I include that I set out in revisioning the Tree of Life, the system that I learned from John Gilbert, it's what I use. It's not the only one I use. My original training was Golden Dawn, which
Mhm.
uses a very different system. But this is the system that I use now. It's a good system. It's a workable system. It's very flexible in some ways, and it has some other advantages. But it's not the only game in town. It's not nothing like the only game in town. And 100 years ago, everybody knew this. I'm thinking Dylan Fortune in her book, The Mystical Kabbalah, talks about how the Sephiroth are, as she would say, objective. They're out there, but the paths are subjective, and everybody changes them from one order to another. And she was right.
Mm.
Practically every separate order working in a Kabbalistic tradition in England in the 1920s had its own distinct way of assigning things to the tree of life.
It's like every school just
And the thing is, they'll work.
yeah.
They'll work perfectly well. Each one has certain advantages, certain disadvantages, certain strengths and weaknesses. And if the people who put the things together were any good, they were careful to make sure that the specific form they used worked with the goals of the school and the particular things they were trying to get done. So
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
all.
I mean,
Just again, do you want your little tack hammer? Do you want your sledgehammer? It depends on what you're trying to do.
yeah. Yeah. And I mean, you'll find the similar concept within astrology and all the branches there. But I guess
Mhm,
it's just because I'm just learning Kabbalah and I'm like overwhelmed by the different sources.
mhm.
So I'm like, okay, just
Yeah.
stay on one path and then
Mhm,
we'll
mhm.
keep, because it seems so different in a way how you would even
Oh,
translate the 10
mhm,
powers.
mhm. Well, the comparison with astrology is a good one because,
Yeah.
of course, there are many different ways of doing. I mean, shall we bicker about house systems?
Yeah. No, no, let's not go there.
No, I use Placidus for my work because I find I get good results. But I have good friends who use whole sign or they use Regiomontanus or they use I don't know what. That's
Yeah.
let's say okay, which pick your hammer
Yeah.
and start driving nails with it.
Yeah. And I think it's part of the magic that it all seemed to work.
Mhm.
Okay, John, I want to go into also where we are with the world. So I have a quote here from you where you say, as I write these words, the Western world is stumbling through a cascade of difficult cultural transformations set in
Hmm.
motion by the failure of the cult of progress to make good on its promises.
Hmm.
The rationalist materialism that provided that cult with its impetus has begun to crumble as it became clear to many people that the artificial world, coupled together by human reason in the service of collective ego, has turned out to be unfit for human habitation. I mean, the way that you write this, oh my God, it feels good and
Thank
awful
you.
at the same time. Like the way that you state it is like, but it's like you nailed it. And yeah, can you say more about the
Okay.
Western world dumpling?
I want to start with the myth of progress.
Yeah,
Okay. Now, that does not mean that progress has never happened. What it means is that we don't know where technological change is going, that many of the things that everyone assumed we would have by now, we don't have. I mean, where's your hoverboard? You're Back to the Future one, everyone had these hoverboards and things, or
right.
the Mr. Fusion thing, all this kind of stuff. When I was a kid in the 1970s, we were supposed to have cities on the moon by the year 2000.
Yeah.
Okay, we were supposed to have all kinds of stuff. Of course, cheap, abundant fusion power was 20 years in the future when I was born. It's 20 years in the future now, and it's entirely possible that when the last human beings go extinct and we're replaced by intelligent beings descended from chipmunks, fusion power will still be 20 years in the future. you know, most of the grand technological innovations that everyone assumed were going to happen have not happened, and there's often good reason to think they will not happen.
Mm.
So we need to stop and say, okay, how did we make these mistakes? How did we back ourselves into a situation where people are still pushing on a door marked pull, trying to make a particular canned Tomorrowland happen when it's clearly not going to happen? And what better things might we do with our time and our available resources? That's a very difficult thing to do because progress has a religious value in today's society. People trust progress these days the way medieval peasants trusted the wonder working bones of Saint Winifred over in the local church. It's totally superstitious. Progress will save us. Progress will take care of everything. It's superstition.
I mean, don't you think a lot of people have that it has turned a little bit into a lot of fear, as we have seen,
Uh huh.
as we can
Oh
all sense AI, and it's like there's also this bubbling fear. Don't
yeah, the whole
maybe
AI thing.
maybe it's just
That's
my circles.
we'll see what happens with AI. So far, it's acting much more like a speculative bubble than like a genuine technological advance. There are some things that AI can do very effectively, but there's a lot that it can't do, and there's no reason to think that there's actually any intelligence going on there. All that they're doing is stringing together words in statistically probable forms. It's
Yeah.
literally all that they do. They just churn out sequences of words that, according to massive analyses of the internet, are more likely to be connected to each other. This is
Mm.
not intelligence.
Mm.
So I think there's a lot of daydreaming masquerading as thoughtful analysis. There's a lot of projection of, again, these Tomorrowland fantasies because we were all supposed to have computers that would talk to us, and all this. You know,
Mm.
my guess is we're going to have some world class disasters because I know people are already talking about turning over healthcare, turning over engineering to these things.
Yeah. Yeah.
So at what point do we have the first AI constructed bridge collapse into the water? Or it turns out that AIs in healthcare have been giving people bad advice and killing them. It's perfectly likely.
And so how does magic and meditation and Kabbalah
Okay.
fit into this?
Okay. The first thing is that the problem with our superstition of progress is that it's all about making machines to replace human capacities.
Yeah.
Instead of developing our minds, we make machines that we call artificially intelligent. Okay, but they're not actually intelligent. But we've got to have that technological prosthetic. We've got to have that imitation of a human capacity. Frank Herbert in Dune had the right idea a long time ago. Why not develop human capacities? We've all in human beings, we already have the capacity for intelligence. Many of us never really develop it much, but we've got it. Why not work on that? Why not work on developing the skills and powers and capabilities in the individual human being and focus on that as a way to develop further, to progress further, if you want to call it that. And there, magic, meditation, systems of esoteric and personal training, these offer an enormous amount of, frankly, low-hanging fruit. I mean, at this point, your average, 21-year-old doesn't know how to do anything. They've been taught, certainly in the United States, they've received very poor, very substandard educations. They have no practical skills at all. They don't know how to use their minds. They don't know how to use their hands. It's not their fault. It's that they've never been taught to do anything but just rely on a machine. So I've discovered myself with people that I've worked with, some very basic skills can be picked up and put to work. And all of a sudden, you're standing head and shoulders above everybody else. So maybe we can pay attention to that for a while. I think, so trying to make flying cars is not working. Did you know the first flying car was actually marketed in 1917?
Oh, man.
They've been doing them all the time because we have this thing stuck sideways on our heads. We've got to have flying cars. Flying cars are part of the Tomorrowland future. It's a dumb idea. It's a really good idea. It so happens in engineering that the things that make for a good airplane and the things that make for a good automobile conflict with one another. So you can have a flying car, but it's going to be a lousy airplane and a lousy car, and it's going to cost so much that you could get a good car, a good plane, and put a down payment on a yacht for the same price. So, but we have this flying car fetish. So in the same way, we have an artificial intelligence fetish, we have a space travel fetish, we have all of these things that we think we have to have these because that's our superstitious belief in what the future must be.
Yeah.
Maybe, let's try something different. Let's try using our own minds for a change.
Yeah, because you say it's built the foundations of a temporary triumph. That's materialism. Anyway, I think that is the greatest argument to go forth with something like the Cabala, to say that, well, it's developing the human capacity.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a great argument.
Upgrade your brain.
Yeah.
We can do this.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So let's go into what it is you're actually training in, an occult training, and you're using the Tree of Life. So maybe we could focus on the second triad, the second triangle in the Tree of Life, because you say that's actually the main focus of occult training.
Yeah, because let's lay some groundwork here.
Yeah.
Okay, the Tree of Life has 10 spheres, and the highest of the spheres in John Gilbert's from awareness is a state that is basically out of reach of ordinary human consciousness, and the lowest of the spheres is sensory awareness. It's the material world that we encounter every day. The lowest 4 spheres are things that we can be aware of that most of us are perfectly well. We have our sensory awareness. That's the 10th sphere manifestation. We have the thing that, of course, our science insists doesn't exist, but everyone knows better, the life force, which is the 9th sphere foundation. And that's what's behind. Well, back in the day, my beard and ponytail may hint at where I'm getting this language from, but back in the day, we used to say the vibes.
Yeah.
Oh man, the vibes of that place were really cool, babe. Or, oh man, did you feel his vibe? We call it. You can call it intuition. You can call it sensing energy. There are various ways, but I kind of like the old style, the vibe.
The vibration, the vibe.
The vibration. Yeah, it's like cool vibes, man. Yeah. Okay, and then you have the 8th sphere, competence, which is the intellect, and you have the 7th sphere, desire, which is the emotions. So those 4 we've all got. Pretty much, we all have the physical sense. We all have the senses. We can hear. Most of us can hear, see, taste, touch, smell. We all have that sense of the life force, even though, the pseudo-skeptical materialist among us that says, no, you don't, how dare you? Okay, we all have at least some degree of intellectual capacity. We also have some degree of emotional capacity. We can develop all those further than we usually do. But it's when you start going beyond that, further up the scale, there's that's the lower triad. That's the ordinary set of human capacities. You start getting to extraordinary human capacities. We all have hints of these things. We all have a little reflected shadow of them. The next three on the way up are imagination, will, and memory. Okay. Now, most of us have some capacity to imagine things. Most of us are very poor at it. We would be, if we were better at it, we'd be much more creative than we are. All of us have maybe a little itsy bit of will. Very little. Usually it's desire that makes up for it. And we all have a little bit of memory. We all know how lousy our memories are, okay? So occult training focuses on developing these three things.
And
Developing the imagination, developing the will, and develop the memory. Go ahead.
Sorry,
No, go ahead.
I just wanted to underline what you talked about with memory, because I remember you saying that it's like if you wanted to, if your memory was really good, then if you wanted to, you could just pull anything up,
Exactly.
per will, but we can't do that.
They've demonstrated, scientists found out a very long time ago that if you take a weak electric current and apply it to little places in the brain, various parts of the brain, people would have sudden clear memories of things they'd completely forgotten. Here's that ice cream sundae you had at the age of 8. In vivid technicolor right there in front of you. You remember how it tasted. You remember the music that was playing on the PA system at the time. There you are. It's all in there.
That's a real skill to dig
that
out.
To get to it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, we have the memory. We all have the capacity to will. Get sufficiently fixated on something. I mean, people who think, oh, I have no willpower at all. You just watch. If they get sufficiently upset, they have enormous amounts of willpower. They often use it in destructive ways, but they have it. Go ahead.
You said it's connected to desire, but that's an okay bridge, isn't it?
To
go from desire to will.
Yeah, basically from desire can motivate will, and desire is kind of the reflection of will below what we call the veil of the sanctuary, the line between the lower 4 and the next 3 up. And then the imagination. I mean, the imagination is really one of the first things that you need to develop in occult practice. That does not mean you have to be able to visualize things as though you were staring at a movie screen. It means you have to be able to imagine. You have to be able to create thought, create new things in your mind. And that's all of these things are part of the way, are part of the skills, or among the skills you develop with esoteric training. All of them. Yeah, I mean, there may be a few people out there who don't need stronger imagination, stronger will, and more effective memory. But I have not met such paragons. Maybe I just run with the wrong crowd. But most of the people I know, and I myself also, we can all use work on those. So esoteric training, magical training is one of the ways to do that. It's one of the ways for us to reach toward more complete ways of being human.
Wonderful. Good. Well said. Okay. More complete ways of being human. Because as you speak of those, I really feel like just sharing with you, and I'm curious to hear what you say, but I feel like those 3 I really recognize them from trauma therapy. Getting through getting through stuff. For me, it's a very magical space, and especially as you describe it there, it's like that imagination. It's really a deep part of healing. It really is. And then memory is, of course, connected to remembering the trauma, and the will is connected to what is it you really want for yourself.
Yeah. What if you actually know what you want, you have some chance of getting it.
Yeah.
Most people never do. And so, of course, a lot of what stands in the way of all of this is the tendency just to take our thoughts and our feelings from our surroundings, from our society, from our parents, from our families, from the schools, from the media especially.
Yeah.
I'm sure we have all heard a couple of people having a debate where if you ask them, they'd say, oh no, these are my ideas. And they're quoting the television. or they're quoting. It's just they're rehashing stuff they picked up off of social media or off of mass media, not an original thought among them. Nor do they realize that much of what they're saying is in fact nonsense, as it so often is, because they've never actually thought about it. They've never actually said, okay, does this make any kind of sense?
And also, like on a subtle layer, like where what do I find to be beautiful? What
Mm-hmm.
parts of my body do I have a problem with? And
Mm-hmm.
I wonder, why do I have that? Right? It's
Why
so
do I have that problem when
old.
the mass media has been desperately trying to make you feel uncomfortable because they can sell more products to you that way?
Yeah.
You have a nose. You realize noses are unsightly. You shouldn't have a nose. Here's this, new nose removal cream. That's basically how they do things.
I mean, they got to us.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so you have to learn a certain degree of self-defense.
Yeah.
Um, that again is something that esoteric training can do. Meditation makes it makes it much easier, certainly, to pay attention to what's going on inside your own mind, and make you able to look at yourself and say, I know where that came from. That's garbage. I'm not interested. And then you don't buy the nose removal cream.
Yeah.
You keep
Yeah.
your nose and you say, well, other people may, the media may think that noses are a bad thing, but I do like occasionally to smell roses now and again. It's kind of difficult to do if you don't have a nose.
Kind of works for that. Yeah. Just walk the other way when you feel like buying it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's sometimes like that. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
So my next question, I feel, is I'm really curious to hear what you have to say about that. It's just because you say that you talk about archetypes, and then not only that they're not only in
Mm-hmm.
the psychological dimension.
Mm-hmm.
And so, what
Okay.
are the implications of that? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
then we are again
Mm-hmm.
talking about
Mm-hmm.
objective, subjective. If they're not only psychological, then
Well,
what are they?
mhm. Okay, we have a rabbit hole to go down.
Yes.
Okay, let's start with this little point. The quote objective world. Okay, how
Yeah.
do you know it exists? You sense it.
Mm.
You're aware of it. All you perceive are the world you perceive as images in consciousness. Okay, you have no direct access to this supposedly objective world. Furthermore, talk to a physicist about, say, the microphone in front of you right now. And that microphone, it looks like a microphone, okay, but it looks like that to you. The
Mm.
physicist will tell you, no, it doesn't look like that at all. It's a collection of standing waves in space-time
Mm.
that have, and the only reason that it looks the way to you that it looks is that photons are bouncing off of it, reaching your eyes, being processed by your eyes, being processed by your nervous system, being identified by your brain. Oh, that's a microphone, and fit into this pattern. It's a process that we think that we just see what's out there. But philosophers have been pointing out for a very long time, since Plato's time, in fact, that no, we don't. We actually construct much of what we see. Owen Barfield, a very interesting philosopher, refers to that process figuration. We all figurate our environments. We get all this sensory material coming in, but we assemble it. We put it together using this process of figuration. Sometimes, if you've ever woken up, staying someplace unfamiliar, you wake up in the early morning, and you're still groggy, and for a moment you can't make sense of your surroundings. They're just these dim, shadowy presences, and then you blink and rub your eyes and realize it's furniture, but it doesn't look that way at first. That's his example of figuration. Another really good example is optical illusions. Think of the image that looks like a duck, the head of a duck one way and the head of a rabbit the other way. There are various things like that, and you can actually get to the point of being able to switch from one to the other mentally.
Huh.
There, you're figurating it in two different ways.
Mm.
So we figurate our world. So when we're talking about, well, there's this objective world, and then there's consciousness as this little bubble in some lumps of meat called human brains, we've literally got the whole thing backwards. There's consciousness,
Mm.
and there is a subset of consciousness that seems to be fairly stable from person to person, which is the consciousness of sensory reality. So where are the archetypes? When we say they exist in consciousness, that does not mean they exist solely inside the lump of meat that we call the human brain.
Mm.
They exist in in consciousness, which is not limited to the inside of any one person's brain. Many of us have had experience at least once or twice in our lives of hearing somebody else thinking.
Mm.
It's it
Yeah.
happens.
Yeah, it's
It
that
happens, and
porosity
that's like,
of mind that it's permeable, that
yeah, exactly,
yeah.
exactly. The the illusion of materialism is this notion that your consciousness is locked up inside your skull,
Yeah.
where in fact your skull and everything in it exists only within consciousness.
Mm.
So
Mm. Okay.
this
Mm.
it takes some work for people to grasp this. Another good thing for meditation, because if you really start meditating on your experience, you start reflecting on your experience and noticing, okay, what do I actually know? What do I actually perceive?
Mm.
You start realizing, oh, this apparently solid world around me is something that I am assembling out of sensory cues. It is something that I am figurating. It is something that is much more flexible than I think it is.
And
And
then
so,
and
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 so
then
go ahead.
I'm so excited to talk to you. And then the archetypes. What, so are they? Yeah, I can't even ask the question
Archi-
because it's so
the ar- arch- yeah,
paradoxical.
no, archetypes are the basic structures of consciousness. They're
Mm.
the basic realities of consciousness. We, as Jung used to say, that we don't experience the archetypes themselves. We can't, any more than you can actually experience that microphone. You
Mm.
don't. No matter what you do, you're not going to see the lattices of space time.
Mm.
Okay, you're going to see what your brain makes out of what your eyes sent it from, what the photons bouncing off it tell you about those lattices.
Mm.
In the same way, you don't perceive the archetypes directly. You perceive their reflections in your consciousness, which is always going to be, jumbled up with various personal and cultural contents. So we have the archetype. You take an archetype like the shadow, okay?
Yeah.
The shadow, which is the archetype of everything you can't stand in yourself.
Mm.
And we all project on onto other people, and we say, you bad person over there, I'm going to convince myself that all the things I hate about myself, you're the one who really has these things. I don't. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
What is in that thing? What is in that archetype varies completely depending on what you can't stand about yourself. I mean, if you can't stand the fact, to revert to my original absurd comment, if you can't abide the fact that you have a nose,
Yeah.
oh, noses are horrible, noses are sinful, I don't have a nose. That one over there with a big honker, that he has the real nose. Um,
Yeah.
Whereas if you aren't neurotic about your nose, you're not going to be upset about that nose. In the same way, whatever the content will be shaped partly by your own experience of life, partly by what your culture labels as shadow material.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever your culture can't stand will tend to shape your shadow projections. In the same way, shadows like the wise old man, like the anima or animus, the sort of perfect sexual partner, all these things which tie into instincts in a certain sense. There's a lot of personal content and a lot of cultural content, as well as biological content, tied up in those things. And the archetype itself, we only see through those filters.
Mm.
But it's important not to confuse the archetype with the filters.
That makes sense. And I like I like the example with the microphone, like a thing, an object, and then what it's actually made of, what it actually consists of. You can't see
Mhm.
that
You can't see it.
because that's just the
Mhm.
way of perception.
Mhm.
But then with an archetype, what I imagine is that it's much bigger
Mhm.
than like the person that say, we're
Oh,
talking about projections here, and so what I see in the other person, that's part of it, but then the archetype is a lot vaster,
mhm.
really.
Okay, yeah. Well, that's why, for example, when we project the shadow onto someone, we don't just hate them because of what they've done. We hate them in this absolutely superhuman way, that because they become evil incarnate. They become something something that's far vaster than human, far vaster and more evil than human being could possibly be. And so people scream at the art, scream all their hatred at the
Mm,
person onto whom they projected their shadow, because that's the archetype,
mm,
and learning to take that back, to recognize that the person is not, this politician or this other person or this family member, whatever, is not the Dark Lord Sauron in person, is not Satan incarnate. It's just an ordinary human being who maybe does some things that irritate you.
Yeah, and it just kind of came alive for me, like that archetype
Mm-hmm.
through
Mm-hmm.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, in the same way, when two people fall in love, when they trigger each other's anima animus,
Mm.
when the contrasexual archetype, um, it often takes quite a while to get past the archetype to actually notice the person.
Yeah.
And so you have these, oh, this person is absolutely perfect and wonderful and luminously gorgeous, and a period of several years passes, then you look on the other side of the bed and go, oh, okay.
I just
But that's when the real work begins. But
yeah, I continuously, and not just in relationships, but in friendships, I
Mhm,
continuously have that experience of there's an imaginary person that I can
mhm,
really feel so much love towards, and then
mhm,
there's the actual person, and like I'm trying, of course, to give that same love to it, but it's not
mhm,
the same person. Like I have an imaginary one
mhm, mhm,
as
mhm,
well. I don't know if
mhm.
you know about.
And that's very much, and into that imaginary person, a certain archetypal force flows, giving that imaginary person that glow that attracts your friendship and love. And
Mm.
to learn to, well, on the one hand, you can learn to direct archetypes consciously onto other people. You can learn to see each friend. This is actually something religious people have been doing a long time. The notion that you should treat every person you meet as a manifestation of the divine. You find that in many religions. What you're doing is projecting an archetype onto that person and
Mm.
then acting accordingly. It's a choice.
That's that could be
So
really useful. That could be
yeah,
really helpful.
when you become conscious of your archetype, of the archetypes, of how you experience them, you can put them on and pull them off and redirect them, and your life becomes much less crazy and much more under your own control, because you're not just being pulled around by random archetypes.
And
Convincing yourself that the hot dog seller, down the street is evil incarnate.
oh
No,
no.
he's not. He's just a hot dog seller. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, okay. So, and is that part of the point, would you say, to have more control?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, One of the great things about something like the Tree of Life, which sets out a set of basic archetypal images,
Mm.
is that you get comfortable with them. You learn how to work with them. You learn how to notice them, and that's when you go, "Oh, I'm projecting the shadow on him, aren't I? He's just a hot dog vendor," and or what have you. And then you can start. Then you start having thoughts rather than letting the thoughts have you.
Yeah. Yeah. Good. Yeah.
And you can have feelings instead of letting your feelings have you. you
Mm.
know then you can still fall giddy in love
Mm.
or what have you. You can still choose to oppose somebody, even fight them, but you're doing it consciously. You're not being sucked into it by obscure subconscious drives or by the screechings of the mass media.
And can you see my link? I think it's a really easy link, an easy connection to therapy,
Oh yeah.
because that's also like the trauma is you lost control, you were helpless.
Hmm.
And so here you're regaining your agency, and it's
Hmm.
so there's so many
Hmm.
similarities. Can you sense that?
Yeah, I don't have much in the way of background in therapy. That's not really a field that I've studied in life, but it makes perfect sense to me that it should work that way.
Yeah.
um, I know a lot of what I had to do in the course of my magical education was reclaim my own agency from a
Yeah.
variety of sources. I mean, if you think of the great wizards of legend, think of Merlin or Gandalf or whoever, they've got agency.
Mm.
They
Yeah.
make things happen, and very little affect them that they don't choose.
Mm.
And so that's kind of a folk sense that's a lot of what esoteric training is about, is gaining that agency and being able to work with it, to choose, and to accept that there will be things that you cannot choose, that you have to deal with anyway,
Mm.
but being able to deal with it still in a conscious, manner rather than, again, doing whatever the media tells you to, or doing whatever your family told you to, or doing whatever some obscure subconscious drive tells you to do.
Totally. Yeah. Okay, John, I have a few more questions. I
Okay.
also want to talk a little bit about your chart, and I just want to say that I'm like still, of course, still because you have many, but I am reading your books in present time, and I have been for years, and it's just so
Thank you.
great to be here with you.
Thank you very much.
There's so much in, there's so much in you.
Well, I have two secret weapons
Yeah.
when it comes to being a writer. First of all, for whatever reason, I think in spoken language. Lots of people think in images, or they think in this or that. I think in spoken language, so I can write almost as fast as I can think.
Interesting.
I also don't have to wrestle with how am I going to phrase this. If I can think it, I already have the words. Okay, and it's complex. I don't know what caused that, but that's the way my mind works. So that's the one thing. And the other thing is that I read voraciously. I'm a crazed reader. I've been an absolute book nerd since I learned to read at the age of 2.5.
Okay.
And so I'm always reading all kinds of weird, obscure items in several different languages.
Whoa.
And so yeah, so I always have these I'm always reading new things, and then I'm always thinking about them. And then I sit down at the keyboard and clickety 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 click. It gives me certain advantages, and I'm perfectly willing to use them. I would rather write than do anything else for a living, so why not?
Wonderful. And it's such a gift for us who are seekers, and then it's you're such a great source on anything occultism. I just wanted to put that in there, but let's return to why you feel that way, because of course I want to relate that to your astrology. But so a question I have for you is about desire. We mentioned it earlier, but do you think that every desire is a desire for the divine ultimately? Or what do you think about desire?
That's Plato's great claim. You find that in the Symposium, the idea that every desire is a misunderstood desire for the one, for the ultimate divine. I have no idea if he's right or not.
Okay.
I mean, if I achieve absolute total enlightenment, I'll probably know that, and then I'll be sure and tell you. But I'm not there yet.
Mm.
I know that human desire. There are many human desires, and they all move in various directions, and they all tie into various archetypes.
What would
We
you say? What kind of desire leads us to study the Kabbalah?
mm, in my well, I don't know what leads you to study the Kabbalah. I
Mm.
don't know even what lead most other people. I haven't sat down and talked to them. In my case, it was complex. I started out living as a kid in the 1970s, living in the suburbs south of Seattle, Washington, and bored out of my mind by 20th century American suburban culture, which was so white bread, so pasty. Everything was nice and neat and organized and mindless, and anything that was outside. So I flung myself into a quest for something that would prove to me the world was not as one-dimensionally stupid as
Yeah.
my parents and my teachers and the media all insisted it had to be.
Yeah.
And so, of course, in the 1970s, that was the golden age of crazy paperbacks about UFOs and Bigfoot and the Bermuda Triangle and everything weird. But there were also books on magic.
Mm.
And there were also cheap paperbacks on magic, which you could find in some surprising places. And so I stumbled across that and said, "Oh my, this feels right. This isn't just sitting back reading about somebody's Bigfoot sighting. This is actually engaging with the world in a genuinely weird way, a way that's as unsuburban as I could get." And in those days, again, this is the 70s. This is before the immense explosion of esoteric traditions we've seen since then, the translation, all this stuff. The choice that I had basically was Wicca or Aleister Crowley or the Golden Dawn.
Oh, okay.
And Wicca's, because that's what there were books on at the time.
Mm.
Wicca had never really appealed to me.
Mm.
Aleister Crowley, I read a certain amount about and said, I don't want to be like him. So it was the Golden Dawn. And the Golden Dawn, the Golden Dawn system starts and ends with the Kabbalah. You've got to learn the Tree of Life. You've got to learn all this Kabbalistic stuff. So I flung myself into it.
Mm.
That's how I got started. And then later on, as I got clear on what I could actually accomplish with it, I was going, okay, this is a good working toolkit that allows me to work with symbols. It allows me to work with states of consciousness. I think I'm going to keep doing it. So
Mm.
that's how I got, again, your mileage may vary. Your path to the Kabbalah may well be completely different from mine, but that's how
Mm.
it happened to me.
Sure. And I'm also thinking about you have, I don't, is it a community? It's like your website there,
Hmm.
ecosophia.net, where, I mean, you have a lot, but there's also interactions. And
Oh
I'm
yeah, yeah,
thinking about, what
yeah.
leads people there. I
It's
read one, I think you wrote one today, didn't you?
mm, um no, I do. I post on Ecosophia every Wednesday.
Okay, so maybe,
Every Wednesday. So tomorrow will be the monthly open post where I field questions. I like conversation.
yeah.
I like online conversation. It's a little easier just to type it out.
But I
And
mean,
so when I
yeah,
put a post up,
yeah.
I'll put a long essay, like a 3,000 word essay or something like that, and then people will comment, and I will do my level best to respond to every comment.
Mhm.
Obviously, I'm screening out the trolls. I'm screening out the spam. I'm all the stuff that doesn't contribute to the conversation.
Yeah, yeah.
But I like that interaction. I really enjoy it. And so the open post, which will go up tomorrow, um, is it's basically saying, okay, ask me anything.
Yeah.
Let's have a conversation. Except
Wonderful.
not about AI.
Sorry, what did you say?
Not about AI.
Oh,
I've noticed weirdly when people AI fans when they start talking about AI, they start sounding like AIs,
oh, okay.
and they
It's
become very dull. And it's like again somebody stringing letter words together in statistically probable patterns. So I rule that one out.
Oh, okay. I have a few comments there, but just for the last thing you said, I
Hmm.
really feel that that is, I mean, it corrects my spelling. That's really good. And it simplifies things so that I may better understand it. But it is so boring. I mean, apropos how you you came in to study
Yeah.
all of these things,
Oh yeah.
it's
Yeah. I.
so boring. It's taking out the soul, is what I feel. It's like
Mhm,
taking out your
mhm,
personality, and even
mhm.
just small mistakes are kind of nice these days. Just like
Yeah.
show me, show me your mistakes. How do you
Mhm,
want to
mhm.
write this word?
Yeah. Oh yeah. No,
Yeah.
I just I my guess is that this is going to be another of those fads, and the technology will end up finding some kind of some very good uses, but it's not a superpower. It's not going to completely transform our world, except by making some people go very messily bankrupt a few years down the road. But
For sure. Anyway, the reason that I mentioned your website there is because that is also for seekers. That's
mhm,
what I'm thinking about with the desire, the spark in us. I want to search for something. Whether it's
mhm.
because of boredom, like
Yeah.
you grew up in illusion, like also here that you wanted to get away from, what your
Mhm,
parents were thinking, or the one-dimensional side of things, and
mhm.
and so that kind of desire for more, and I feel like that place like that is really great for seekers, and many places are not great for seekers
No,
these
no.
days.
There's a lot of people who are trying to monetize seekers who are saying, "Follow me, pay me lots of money,"
Yeah.
and I like to start conversations. I like to have weird conversations.
Mhm.
Again, it's that up from suburbia. Um, I I write essays on strange subjects, and they're not. I often don't even know what I'm going to write about when I sit down and say, "Okay, time for a post," and I'll end up reading the thing, going, "Okay," but they always like it,
Mm.
and so I position myself very consciously out on the far fringes,
Mhm.
say talking about the things that most other people won't talk about, and within reason, and it makes for a really. I've attracted a very interesting community. This is a common. My commentary is the best commentary on the internet. They are polite. They're intelligent. They always have something to say, and often it's something I don't expect, and very often they know things I don't. So it's all the more fun.
It is more fun, right?
It is.
To
It's yeah. There
back
is
and forth.
nothing. There is nothing more dull than the kind of "Wow, tell me more," Escars. I mean, that's so suburban. It's like people staring at a television, going, with drool puddling in their laps. The way.
You're right. I mean, this new time is that we each of us
Mhm.
have a wisdom,
Oh yeah.
and hopefully also some pieces of good information.
That would be useful too.
to convey that
Oh
wisdom.
yeah, in terms of the psychoastrological ages, Pisces is ruled by Neptune, and so it was an age of unities. It was an age of collectivities, of where the idea was there was one truth and everyone had to follow it, even though, of course, different communities disagreed bitterly on what the truths were and murdered each other because of it. As we move into Aquarius, as the vernal point moves into Aquarius, which is ruled by Uranus, which is the planet of eccentricity and individuality and all-out weirdness, everybody has their own truth. And the sooner we get used to that, the sooner we let go of this notion that, there is one truth and you must believe what I say, or, I'm going to pound it into your head. We've done that for the last 2,160 years. It did not work. It did not bring about utopia. Okay, let's give it a break. Let's try something different now that we're in a new age of the world.
Let's give it a really long break, and then it's also Aquarius and Uranus is also about community, right in there
Yeah.
with the originality and your unique
Yeah,
truth.
there's a certain humility involved. Of course, most of my actual astrological work, if I may venture into that briefly, is political astrology. I do mundane charts. And in mundane charts, Uranus is a malefic. Uranus is the planet of things going boom. Partly that's for the last 7 years he's been in his fallen Taurus, which has not helped. If you wonder why life has been interesting in the way it has, we've had a major malefic planet passing through the sign of its fall. As it gets safely into Gemini, we'll go, it's retrograde back into Taurus. Now, once it gets into Gemini, politics may become a little less crazy. Here's hoping. But Aquarius is also, all the people I remember back when I was a kid, sing Age of Aquarius, there may be some sympathy and understanding, empathy and trust abounding, all the kind of stuff that was in the song, but that's very Piscean.
Yeah.
So no, it's more like weirdness and occasional crazed disasters and people getting really eccentric and mad scientists and crazed inventors and prophets with an audience of one. And it will certainly be a wild ride. And we'll go through 2,160 years of that, and then we'll be desperately ready for Capricorn. Nice, stable, practical Capricorn. Let's stop. Exactly. Just as we've had the last 2,000 plus years of Pisces, and I think most of us are ready to do something else.
It's a really interesting idea that in the Piscean age, you were imagining the Aquarius age, and the way that you were imagining it was really from the standpoint of Piscean.
Totally Piscean.
All
Totally Piscean.
inclusive, singing together, and
Exactly. There's the song from the musical Hair, The Age of Aquarius. It's the most Piscean thing imaginable.
Interesting.
It's funny.
Yeah.
But yeah, in fact, most visions of the next age, and I assume this was also probably true when the Aryan age gave way to the Piscean. People had this vision of a very Aryan future, and then that's not what they got. It's one of those things. The stars are always waiting to remind us that we don't have a clue.
We don't have a clue, and I feel it's a red thread actually in this conversation that we are so conditioned, and so it's hard for us to really imagine outside of that, and that's part of what we're trained. So actually, I think this is a good segue to go to the astrology, don't you think, John? So it's just here in the end. Usually, I have a little chat about my guest's birth chart, but I kind of want to ask you because this is too big for me when you know so much about astrology. What do you feel is most like important for you in your chart? What is there anything you feel like sharing?
Okay. Well, the basics are always essential. I have Sun in Gemini, Moon in Leo, Leo rising. Moon in ascendant or conjunct. Sun and Mercury are conjunct, and both of them are trine my natal Saturn. So, who is in Aquarius, by the way? So there we go. And that really, right there, you kind of have a fairly decent summary of my personality and my life. You know, my intellect tends to focus on old stuff. There's that Saturn connection. To the extent that I succeed in life, I succeed the Saturnian way. You know, a step at a time, very patiently. The older I get, the happier I get, so by and large. So,
And becoming an expert,
there we go.
becoming,
Yeah, yeah,
a trusted
yeah.
person.
Exactly. That Mercury Saturn trine is, you know, I suspect I'll be completely insufferable as an old man. You Sonny boy, I tell you this. No, no, no. This is a. But yeah, and so that's kind of how I would characterize the basic armature of my chart. I mean,
Yeah,
obviously all the other planets are in other places, but
all of those. Yeah, I just really feel like it's so potent with your Gemini there, and how
Mhm,
you work with knowledge and
mhm,
insights and writings, and the way that it just comes to you,
mhm,
because
mhm,
it's it's also the ruler of your North Node there, your
mhm,
Sun,
mhm.
and
Yeah,
and yeah, Mercury in its own sign and being
Mercury.
retrograde,
Mhm,
so you care about
mhm,
different stuff than other people,
Oh
doing it
yeah,
your own
yeah.
way.
Oh yeah, and of course that's also reinforced by Uranus in the first house. You
Mm,
know, the road not traveled is always my route of choice. I mean, for example, I didn't get into astrology by way of natal charts. Everyone gets into astrology by natal charts. I got into it through the Golden Dawn by way of doing horary.
yeah.
Gold back in the day, I was doing the Golden Dawn as completely as I could.
Mm,
Back in the day, every Golden Dawn initiate was expected to be able to cast and interpret horary charts. So I learned horary. And I
yeah.
went from there to do electional astrology, and from there into mundane. I am learning natal astrology, but I'm not at a professional level there yet. But
Yeah,
yeah,
and so that's also that traditional thing when we're talking about it being
mhm.
Saturnine, then it's more
Oh,
traditional.
yes, here's an old, archaic, largely forgotten tradition. Ooh,
Interesting.
I want it. I want it.
Yes. Yeah, that's really good.
Always.
That's really good. I also reckon that with your moon placement, and I'll close your chat so I don't continue, but just what I thought to say is also that your moon is right there on the ascendant, and so it's, I think you could be more sensitive than you give, maybe the
Oh,
first impression. And
That's yeah, and I've had to have I had a fairly unpleasant childhood, and so I had to raise defenses against certain kinds of sensitivity. But yeah, that's there. Of course,
mm,
also, you know, having the moon in the first house, that'll explain why I've relocated myself so many times.
mm.
You know, that's an older sort of astrology, focusing on prediction rather than psychological analysis. But yeah, moon in the first house usually means somebody's going to change their residence a lot.
Okay, no, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's where did I find that? Ivy Goldstein Jacobson, who was an American astrologer in the mid 20th century. She lived in Los Angeles, and she published a whole bunch of books that she published them themselves. She typed out the pages and took them down to a local print shop and got them bound. You can still find her books somewhere. But she was one of the last of the red hot astrologers of the old pre Dane Rudyard, pre Mark Edmund Jones, pre psychological school. She was less interested in in psychology, more interested in prediction. What's going to happen? That's
Mm,
kind of my major focus too. I mean,
yeah.
self knowledge is very useful, but having some idea of what's coming down the pike is also very useful.
Yeah. I feel that's that air quality of
Mhm.
Saturn in Aquarius, and
Oh
it's
yeah, yeah.
my planet there. That's kind of, that
Mhm.
technical information, and where I'm coming to you from Scorpio, Pluto in Scorpio generation. And so
Uh,
it's very psychological, it's very
mhm,
trauma
mhm,
oriented.
mhm.
So
And that's the thing is my guess is that 10 centuries from now, people will remember the 20th and 21st centuries as the time when psychological astrology really hit the big time, when it really hit its stride.
yeah.
And they'll be using that, it will be its own branch of astrology. People will have, just as we have horary, we have mundane, we have medical astrology. They'll have psychological astrology, and people will go, oh wow, yeah, here are these great 20th and 21st century works, classic works passed down through the generations. And you know
Yeah.
But just now, I think to some extent, for my taste, certainly there may be a little too much focus on the psychology. I want to know other things.
Yeah, I
When
mean
I
that's
write when I write about politics, I want to say, okay, what's actually going on? What
yeah.
can we expect over the next 3 months in the political sphere?
Yeah,
That's
but
what I'm looking for.
that is so important. It shouldn't be either or, that's super
Oh, I know,
important
I
that
know.
because we are always like we're talking about so conditioned and we are so
Hmm,
in
hmm.
connection, so in
Yeah.
relationship, we're so situated. We are always
Hmm.
somewhere with someone else. And so when there is an individual trauma, it's like never only just that. It's
Oh
part
yeah.
of a
Hmm.
social movement that
Oh
got you
yes.
there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So it's really important. Okay.
Mhm.
Oh man, we didn't get to talk about pathworking, but that's a whole theme, and it's there for us in the book, right?
Hmm.
So, what do you feel like closing with, John? Oh man, this is
Um,
so good to have.
just this book is part of, as I mentioned, it's part of the material that I received from John Gilbert.
Yeah,
It is the book's a standalone thing, but it also works very closely with a lot of my other books. You can combine it with my Golden Section Fellowship series. You can combine it with my Druid books, most of them, and it's part of a broader system. I will probably be writing more on that subject later on. We'll see. But the point is not to say, oh, here's the system from John Michael Greer. The point is, or here's the system from John Gilbert. The point is,
and-
here's a set of tools. Here's your hammer.
yeah,
Pick up the hammer. Here's some nails. Now go build something with it, and you yourself can decide what you want to build. That's not
yeah,
my job. That's your job, and based on your own personal vision of
mm,
what you want.
mm, yeah. And to imagine that,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
to will that, and to remember that. Yeah,
Remember
always.
that. Bingo!
Oh man, this was so good. John Michael Greer, thank you so much for being on. I
Thank
finally,
you much for
finally
having me
got
on. I appreciate it. I appreciate our conversation.
wonderful.